Have you ever wondered what humans did all day, hundreds of thousands of years ago, when there were no jobs, no smartphones, and no television? Were they constantly hunting just to stay alive, or was their daily life far more interesting than we imagine? Today, let's find out. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, imagine something for just a moment. Your phone doesn't ring, there is no alarm, you don't have to rush anywhere. No office, no boss, no meetings, no deadlines hanging over your head. You slowly get out of bed, step outside, feel the cool morning air on your face, and ask yourself one simple question. What do I feel like doing today? It sounds like a fantasy, but surprisingly, this was once the normal way humans lived. Not for a few days, not for a few years, but for nearly 300,000 years. Today, most of us wake up and immediately check the time. Am I running late? I need to get to work. I have to finish my tasks. I need to earn money. I can't fall behind. But our ancestors started their mornings very differently. They didn't wake up wondering how many hours they had to work. Instead, they asked a much simpler question. How should I spend today? And that may be one of the biggest differences between their world and ours. The average person today spends roughly 90,000 hours working during their lifetime. That's about 1/3 of their waking life. Yet for around 99% of human history, the idea of having a job simply didn't exist. There were no salaries, no companies, no bosses, no promotions, no careers. So that raises an obvious question. What did people actually do all day? The answer isn't based on guesswork. It's supported by scientific evidence that completely changed the way researchers think about human history. In 1963, anthropologist Richard Lee traveled to Botswana in southern Africa. He spent months living alongside the Juhwansi people, one of the last hunter-gatherer societies whose lifestyle closely resembles how humans lived before agriculture. Lee carefully recorded everything they did: when they woke up, when they searched for food, how long they worked, and how they spent the rest of their day. When his research was finally complete, the results surprised the scientific world. He found that these hunter-gatherers spent only about 17 hours per week gathering food. That's an average of just 2.5 hours a day. The rest of their time was spent with family, talking, relaxing, playing with their children, laughing, singing, creating things, and simply living. At first, many researchers assumed this might be unique to just one community, but then scientists studied other hunter-gatherer societies around the world. The Hadza of Tanzania, the Ashe of Paraguay, the Martu people of Australia. Different continents, different climates, different cultures. Yet the pattern was remarkably similar. Most spent only 15 to 20 hours a week doing essential work. The rest of their time belonged to their families, friends, and communities. If you work 40 or 50 hours every week, you're probably spending more than twice as much time working as many of your ancient ancestors did. But many people ask an important question. These are modern hunter-gatherers. How do we know people living 20,000 or 50,000 years ago were the same? That's where the story becomes even more fascinating, because the answer isn't hidden in old books. It's hidden inside ancient human bones. When archaeologists compared the skeletons of prehistoric hunter-gatherers with those of the earliest farmers, they discovered something unexpected. Early farmers were generally shorter. Their bones showed signs of poor nutrition. A grain-heavy diet led to far more cavities. Years of repetitive labor left noticeable damage on their spines and joints, and on average, they lived shorter lives. But hunter-gatherer skeletons told a very different story. They were taller, stronger, their teeth were healthier, their joints showed far less wear. Their bodies didn't look like they belonged to people struggling every waking hour just to survive. Instead, they suggest a lifestyle that was more balanced, more active, and perhaps more free. But the strongest evidence was still waiting to be discovered. Evidence that forced scientists to ask an entirely new question. If ancient humans spent every moment fighting hunger, where did they find the time to create art? In 1994, researchers discovered an extraordinary cave in France, filled with paintings nearly 30,000 years old. Horses, lions, rhinoceroses. The artwork was so detailed and lifelike that it's hard to believe it was created tens of thousands of years ago. These weren't simple drawings. They showed depth, movement, light, and shadow. The artist wasn't just trying to survive. They were trying to create something beautiful, and the most valuable thing they invested in those paintings wasn't food, it was time.
The paintings found in a cave in France weren't just art, they raised an important question. If ancient humans spent every day fighting for survival, how did they have time to create such beautiful paintings? As archaeologists explored more sites around the world, they kept finding surprising evidence. In South Africa's Blombos Cave, they discovered 100,000-year-old seashells with tiny holes drilled into them. These weren't ordinary shells, they were jewelry. Someone walked nearly 40 kilometers just to collect them, then carefully shaped them into ornaments. This shows that ancient humans cared about beauty, not just survival. Another amazing discovery came from Germany in 2008. Scientists found a 40,000-year-old flute made from a vulture's wing bone. It had perfectly placed finger holes. This means ancient humans didn't just hunt, they also made music. Across Europe, Africa, and Asia, archaeologists found decorations, carvings, and beautifully crafted tools. These discoveries tell us one thing: humans lived not only to survive, but also to create. A typical day probably began at sunrise. People gathered around the fire, shared breakfast, talked, and laughed together. Some went hunting, others collected fruits, roots, and plants. If there was already enough food, many people stayed at camp. They repaired tools, made clothes, or created useful objects. There were no bosses, no work schedules, and no fixed working hours. People worked because they wanted to help their community. When hunting, humans relied on endurance, not speed. They patiently tracked animals for hours until they became exhausted. A hunt usually took only 3 to 6 hours. After sharing the food, the rest of the day was often free. People relaxed under trees, played with children, made jewelry, carved art, or simply talked with one another. Anthropologist James Sussman found that modern hunter-gatherers spend around 6 hours a day socializing. Their greatest wealth wasn't money, it was strong relationships. In the ancient world, your people were your greatest strength. And as the sun set, the most magical part of the day was just beginning. The day humans lost their freedom. As the sun disappeared behind the horizon, the entire camp began to change. The fire burned brighter. Children gathered around their families. Hunters returned with the day's food. For the first time all day, there was no rush, no deadlines, no pressure. This was when humans weren't just surviving, they were truly living. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherer societies found that when night fell, conversations transformed into stories. Stories about brave ancestors, the origins of the world, adventures, laughter, and lessons passed from one generation to the next. These weren't just bedtime stories. They shaped culture, they inspired imagination, and they laid the foundation for religion, traditions, and eventually, civilization itself. Life was surprisingly balanced. People spent only a few hours gathering food. The rest of the day was shared with family, friends, music, storytelling, and rest. There were no clocks, no schedules, no endless to-do lists. No one felt the need to prove they were productive every minute of the day. They simply lived. But everything changed around 10,000 years ago. Humans discovered agriculture. They planted crops, raised animals, and settled in one place. At first, it seemed like the greatest invention in history. More food meant more people, but it also meant more work. Fields had to be planted, harvested, protected. Food had to be stored. And suddenly, life revolved around responsibility. Archaeologists believe the earliest farmers actually worked harder than hunter-gatherers. Many had poorer diets, more physical stress, and shorter lives. Yet there was no turning back. The population had grown too large. As villages became cities, new jobs appeared: blacksmiths, merchants, soldiers, builders, and eventually, people began trading their time for money. The modern world had begun. Today, many of us spend nearly 90,000 hours of our lives working. We wake up to alarms, we chase success, money, promotions, and achievements. But our ancestors woke with the sunrise. They didn't dream of vacations, because life itself felt worth living. They created art because they had time. They made music because being alive was something to celebrate. Perhaps our minds haven't changed very much. What has changed is the world around us. We gained safety, we gained comfort. But in many ways, we traded away our freedom. We built incredible civilizations. Yet somewhere along the journey, we may have lost the simple life that once came naturally to being human. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.